This is the instruction guide for the second assignment in Ling 100. So there's 4 questions this time. They're a little bit less involved overall than the last one. In other words, the first question in the first assignment was 14 points. We don't have anything this large in this assignment. So this one covers writing systems, it covers language acquisition, and it covers neurolinguistics. So the same thing as last time, groups of up to 3 are fine. Please put all the group members' names on the PDF itself. So don't comment them on the submission. Don't put them in the name of the assignment. Just put them on the PDF themselves. Uh, if the question says write it in sentences, you can still do it in point form. So a lot of you wrote tons of paragraphs and lots of words on the last assignment. You don't have to do that. You could do point form if you want. Just get your idea expressed. Okay, so let me go over each of these questions to give you a little background. Okay, the first one is classifying writing systems. There's 2 parts to this one. First, you can check out the website that I've been using to get constructed languages for the course, the different scripts. It's a nice, convenient website. There's real languages and constructed languages. So there's 8 conlangs listed below. Ara Haufar, Charonagari, Kronam, ML Gugu, Kiawo, Rikchik, Talisman Script, Zimaran. Probably mispronounced multiples of those. You just have to classify them as one of the 5 types. Some of them have classifications on the site themselves, and some of them aren't quite right, so be careful of that. Some of them are accurate, though, so it's up to you to make that judgment. The second part has you take a look at the conlang picto sounds. So you can click these on the PDF themselves. If for some reason the site doesn't work, let me know. I can try to copy the pages somehow so you have access to them. Picto sounds might be a little bit more difficult to classify, so you have a chance to explain yourself, say whether or not it's easy to categorize, and justify your answer. There is a correct answer for it, but I'm giving you a chance to justify yourself with this one because it is a little bit more complicated. And it's a little bit misleading at times. So that's writing system, something you're a little bit more familiar with, but it's good to revisit because we didn't get to spend that much time with it. Language acquisition, we have 1 question on second language acquisition and 1 question on first language acquisition. With second language acquisition, we're going to talk about transfer and interference, specifically interference. So we're taking a look at a sentence, the hairy gorilla slowly walked into the house and then she ate all the sweets. And what we're doing with this sentence is we're taking a look at how second language learners of English take features from their first language and how those features interfere with the syntactic patterns or morphological patterns of English. So for example, if you have a second language speaker who in their first language places adjectives after nouns, that pattern might interfere. So instead of saying the hairy gorilla, they might say the gorilla hairy, because the fact that adjectives appear after nouns in their first language interferes with English patterns. So there's a Japanese speaker, a Greek speaker, and a Bengali speaker. I tell you what they do in their L1, and you basically have to bring those patterns from their L1 over into English in L2 and transform that hairy gorilla sentence and say, well, what would that look like if this Japanese speaker brought their patterns over into English? What if that Greek speaker brought their pattern over into English? And you might not know what some of these terms mean. Well, you probably know what the terms mean, but you might not be super comfortable with them. So I try to give you examples and I highlight what subjects are in the original sentence, underline what objects are, and try to make things clear. So that way, even if you're not super comfortable with the terms, you can still work with the examples and manipulate the sentences. So if you have questions about these, please email me. This question is not supposed to be super difficult. This is supposed to be an illustration of what happens in the real world. So please do ask if there's any confusing terms here. The second question is about first language acquisition with 1-word stage infants. So I said in lecture, with simplification strategies, we'd go a little bit more in depth on the assignment, and that's what we do. So I give you a little bit more description about different IPA characters. We talk about stops, fricatives, and liquids. So these are terms, well, we've heard about stops, but fricatives and liquids might be new, so I just tell you what those are. We take a look at different simplification strategies, and your job is to figure out in each of these patterns which sounds are being deleted. And you're going to have to figure out which sounds are more likely to delete in general, which ones are least likely to delete, figure out, which ones are easier, which ones are harder. And then based on those and different substitution strategies, with these words, just like we did in lecture, how have these words changed? Which strategies have been used? But we're going to be a little bit more specific. Which substitution pattern was used? Which simplification pattern was used? And then here's some words: speak, goblin, thunk, and ching. I'm giving you specific patterns that I want you to apply, and then you just tell me what the end result is after applying these patterns. And I'm using terms like onset and coda, so you might have to go back to lecture 3 to remember what those terms mean, because that's where the patterns have to be applied. And you might have to look at the strategies to figure out, which sounds are changing to which areas, or which. So like if I say substitution in the coda, denasalization, well, what is that going to change to? You might have to take a look at the chart to figure out, well, this is the place it is, so it should probably change in the same place. And again, please ask any questions if you have them. This is a little bit more exploratory. In lecture, it was a little bit more general, but this is very much more specific to how things actually work in real life. This is much more real with data. So we don't have a real child here with real audio files, but this is very real data with what you'd actually hear. The final question, we haven't done neurolinguistics yet, so this might not make much sense at the time you're watching this video, but we will talk about neurolinguistics next week. We're going to talk a little bit about dyslexia in lecture. We're not going to talk that much about it, but this will be an opportunity to investigate dyslexia a little bit more. So we'll talk about things like surface dyslexia, phonological dyslexia, and deep dyslexia. I might give you some more information about it as an extra link for this assignment. But these questions are going to have you think a little bit more about the connection between dyslexia, what's called the dual root model of reading, which we're going to talk about as well. So how do we go from looking at words on a page to actually speaking them out loud, and then connecting that with acquiring reading as children. So first, you're going to take a look at some mistakes that children could make reading and say, well, what type of dyslexia would cause those errors? Then you're going to have to make a connection and say, okay, this type of dyslexia, phonological dyslexia and surface dyslexia, how might that actually affect a child's acquisition of reading? So this might require a little bit more thought. You'll have to tie it into the dual root model of reading. I say it requires thought, but this doesn't require an essay. You can do this in 2, 3, 4 sentences. So don't take a long time to do this. Just think about it, write it concisely. Do your best here. You can get most of this out of the lecture slides, but it might take a little bit to put it together. And the last one, you'll have some tasks that measure linguistic ability as a prerequisite for reading. What abilities do they test, and why are these abilities important for reading? So tell me a word that rhymes with cat. If you take away the first sound of cat, what do you get? If you reverse the two parts of the word blackboard, what do you get? Okay, so you can tie these in to testing which types of dyslexia you might have. Which areas of the dual root model of reading is this testing? So when we say measuring linguistic ability as a prerequisite of reading, we're just asking about the components that eventually build into the dual root model and build into dyslexia. So that is the overview for assignment 2. If you have any questions about any of these, please ask. But again, this dyslexia question, you can't do it until we talk about neurolinguistics, so you might have to wait a week until that. So please get started on it as soon as you can. And if you do need to find groups, you can post on the discussion board or go on Discord, and I'm sure people will be happy to group up with you. So that's all I've got. Email, discussion board, all that stuff.